Thank you, Mike. Is everybody back, or is there still some missing persons? Are we ready? Okay. All right. One little last thing I wanted to say about point of view, and that's, how do you know who is the best point of view character in your book? I mean, when I start out, I usually have a pretty good idea of who my character's going to be, but there have been a couple of times when I've started to question, like, well, maybe this other character is the one. And a couple of things you might ask yourself if you're kind of struggling with that, who's the best point of view character, is which character is in a position to learn the most from the events that take place through the course of the book? Which character is going to change or grow the most from the beginning of the novel to the end? And that normally is your point of view character. That's another way you can decide if you actually have more than one point of view characters, if you have two or more characters that are going to go through, pretty equal changes or growth because of whatever takes place in the course of the book. So those are just a couple of tips that you might ask yourself if you're trying to make that decision. Okay, now my favorite part of this is the voice and character, and perspective. And your character's voice. Every time I go to conferences, writers' conferences, and the newer writers are always asking about voice, and not just newer writers. I mean, it's such a confusing concept sometimes to think about what is voice, because editors will say, we want an original voice. We want a different voice, and then you send them something you think has a different voice, and they say, oh, it's too different. So really your voice is not something I don't think that you can purposely set out to change. But what we're going to talk about mainly is the voice of your character, and your personal voice is going to affect the voice of your character. But at the same time, Marcy's never been a homeless. She was not homeless as a little girl or an adult, but yet she was able to make her voice. I hear Marcy in Copper Daniels. I mean, even though Copper has a very unique, street smart voice of a little girl, I still hear Marcy in her. So her voice comes through in that character, even though Marcy's never had that experience. But what I really want to focus on is something that really bothers me when I read, is when every character sounds the same in a book, especially if you have maybe two characters that are similar, like, two sisters or something. So they're similar in age and they're both female, and they sound the same, and it's hard to tell unless the author tells you who's speaking. You wouldn't be sure. What I love is when I read a book and the author doesn't even have to tell me who's speaking. From the start, I find out at the start what their voices sound like, and then I know throughout the rest of the book the author wouldn't even have to say, and I would know which character is speaking because their voice is unique to them. And so that's what we all want to strive to do, is make our characters have those kind of unique voices that reflect who they are. But they have to be, you want them also to be realistic. You want them to, whatever their background is, you want that to be reflected in their voice so they seem real. And so your character's voice should reflect who he or she is, their upbringing, their education, their age, where they're from, and their personality. Are they uptight? Are they laid back? Are they funny? Are they serious? It needs to reflect that in a way that you, the author, don't have to tell the reader she, is had a Harvard education. If you can let that come through in her voice, you might mention that, but rather than beating your readers over the head with that, if you let that come through in their voice, that this is a very, Ivy League educated person, or they grew up on the streets, let that come through in their voice. So you need to strive to give your readers insight into your characters by making those elements apparent through your character's voice instead of only telling them. For instance, instead of saying 80-year-old Mary was raised in the Deep South and dropped out of school at the age of 13, show them that through the wording of Mary's thoughts and her dialogue. Mary's voice must back up what you've told the reader about her, okay? So now, does this mean that Mary, who grew up on the streets, can't use proper grammar? No, I mean, she could. But you need to let your reader know why. Why is that? Why does this woman who grew up on the streets have perfect grammar? And, you need to motivate that. So what would be some reasons maybe that is? Maybe her parents were well educated, even though they lived on the streets. Before whatever happened to make them homeless, they might have been very educated, and she learned through them. Maybe she read a lot. Maybe this was a child that read everything she could get her hands on, and so she learned, her speech patterns through that. So if that's the case, and you have this kind of unusual situation where you have this super educated child who's living on the streets, we need to know, you need to motivate that, okay? Make the voice reflect that. A character's perspective should also reflect who she is, and perspective is the way that a person looks at something, or their understanding and their opinion of something. A person's perspective of a situation differs based on those elements: upbringing, education, personality, age, where they're from. That's their life experience. So here's some examples. Typically, an 80-year-old man will have a different perspective of a Justin Bieber performance than will a 12-year-old girl, okay? So, an 18-year-old young man who grew up on a struggling farm in Claude, Texas, and has never been outside of the state of Texas is going to have a different perspective on the first day of college at Columbia University in New York City than will an 18-year-old young man who grew up in Manhattan and spent every summer traveling all over the world with his parents, okay? They have a lot in common. They're born the same year. They've had certain things that they would both share because of that, but they also have this different life experience. An easygoing, outgoing extrovert is going to have a different perspective of an invitation to a party at a stranger's house than will an introverted, nervous loner, okay? That extrovert's going to be, oh, wow, I can't wait for this. And while I'm going to be going, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay home. Each of these people as characters in your novel should react to the situations that you put them in based on their unique combination of traits and their prior experience. Otherwise, your characters won't seem like real people. They won't be believable to your reader. Now, is every character going to fit this mold? No. Not every person raised in Texas on a small southern town or in a small southern town grows up to be a conservative Republican. What are some reasons? What are some reasons why that might be? He said intelligence. I didn't say it. He said it, okay? In this election year, that's not a good thing to get into, okay? I probably shouldn't have used that example. Okay, there you go. See, his parents may have been hippies that grew up, on the East Coast, and for whatever reason, they ended up living in Claude, Texas, and raised their family there. But through his parents, he's kind of, developed their mindset about certain things. He might have gone away to school to a university in a different part of the country and changed his way of thinking. There's all kinds of things. So not every character's not gonna fit the mold, but he could be rebellious. Yeah. A funny story. My brother-in-law is an ex-cop, and he's very black and white, right and wrong. Great guy, good and bad. His son, when he reached about 16, 17, told him that he was how did he put it? He smoked pot and he was a Democrat. And he was so upset. I mean, it was just like the world had ended, because And his kid was rebelling. I mean, he really didn't know who he was at that point, and he was just doing whatever he knew would push his daddy's buttons. So, so yeah. I think the whole picture, the whole thing was just too much for him to take. But okay, so at the same time that you want their voice and their perspective to reflect their background, if that if that perspective doesn't quite match their background, you need to motivate that in your story. Let the reader know why that is. Okay. Here's some examples I'm going to read to you, and then maybe you can tell me what you get from these about the character. And I'm not going to tell you till after I read them, what the book is and that sort of thing. So we don't have any kids in here, so I can read this. Generally, the closer people get to me, the less hot they find me, said Margot. That's, I started. Whatever, she answered. It struck me as somewhat unfair that an asshole like Jason Worthington would get to have sex with both Margot and Becca when perfectly likable individuals such as myself don't get to have sex with either of them or anyone else for that matter. That said, I like to think that I'm the type of person who wouldn't hook up with Becca Arrington. She may be hot, but she is also, one, aggressively vapid, and two, an absolute unadulterated raging bitch. Those of us who frequent the band room have long suspected that Becca maintains her lovely figure by eating nothing but the souls of kittens and the dreams of impoverished children. Becca does sort of suck, I said, trying to draw Margot back into the conversation. Okay, the point of view character. What do you learn about that point of view character without anything being told to you but his thoughts? High school, okay. Male. He feels deprived. Is he? Yeah, he's a nice guy because he doesn't see himself hooking up with that wild woman. Although a little part of him wants to. He's intelligent. His vocabulary tells you that he is a smart kid. Aggressively vapid, and just his. Yeah, and just also his thought patterns, that he thinks she maintains her figure by eating nothing but the souls of kittens and the dreams of impoverished children. Okay, he's an intelligent guy. Okay, he's trying to fit in. Yeah, and maybe he's been, bullied. I kind of infer that maybe he grew up, he's not like your typical kid that age, so maybe he's experienced some backlash from that. So that's from Paper Towns by John Green, the YA novelist John Green. I also thought the character has a sense of humor. You realize he's got a sense of humor. Okay, here's another one, and think about what you learn about this character. It takes a while to get to the end of the hall, but I do, and on my own pins, too. I'm pleased as punch, although once there, I realize I still have to find my way back. I edge up to the glass and raise my face, squinting against the sunlight. It's so bright it takes a moment for me to make out what's happening. Then the forms take shape. In the park at the end of the block is an enormous canvas tent, thickly striped in white and magenta, with an unmistakable peaked top. My ticker lurches so hard I clutch a fist to my chest. "Jacob, oh Jacob," cries Hazel. "Oh dear, oh dear." Her hands flutter in confusion. "I'm fine," I say, coughing and pounding my chest. That's the problem with old ladies. They're always afraid you're about to keel over. "Hazel, I'm fine." Okay. What do you infer about that character? He's elderly. Okay. He's moderately educated. Okay. What else? He's stubborn.
Wants to be independent.
He wants to be independent, yeah. He doesn't like her worrying about him, and he's a little cranky. Yeah, he could be my dad. He fits all those. Okay, so without the author telling you any of that, his age, anything about him, just from reading that, a lot about that character, and that's from Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. You also know that his health is kind of fragile from that. Okay. And here's another really good example that I love. Nobody yells after anybody to do this or that here. My new mama lays out the food and we all take a turn to dish it out. Then we eat and have a good time. Toast or biscuits with anything you please, eggs any style, corn cut off the cob the same day we eat it. I keep my elbows off the table and wipe my mouth like a lady. Nobody barks, farts, or feeds the dogs under the table here. When everybody is done eating, my new mama puts the dishes in a thing, shuts the door, cuts it on, and voila, they are clean. Okay. She's probably kind of grown up in a deprived situation, a foster child with her new mama. Okay. Young, yes. Yeah, maybe 12 or 13 sounds about right. Or younger. Okay. I also thought maybe she's, been grown up so poor she doesn't even have a television because she didn't know what a dishwasher was. And do you get the sense that she likes her new surroundings or she doesn't like her new surroundings? She likes her new surroundings. Okay, right. Yes, yeah. Like she feels like she's, risen through the ranks a little bit. Yeah, she's in a better place. Yes.
Teach the mentally challenged,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this one guy. But anyway, the main thing he loved
Okay. Yeah. So see, that's a perspective thing, So if you're writing a mentally challenged character, you do things like that in your story to show that aspect of their personality without even having to tell the reader that they're mentally challenged. That example I just read was from Ellen Foster by Kay Gibbons. And then I've got one more of these. I pulled the fork out of the dog and lifted him into my arms and hugged him. He was leaking blood from the fork holes. I like dogs. You always know what a dog is thinking. It has 4 moods: happy, sad, cross, and concentrating. Also, dogs are faithful, and they do not tell lies because they cannot talk. I had been hugging the dog for 4 minutes when I heard screaming. I looked up and saw Mrs. Shears running toward me from the patio. She was wearing pajamas and a housecoat. Her toenails were painted bright pink, and she had no shoes on. She was shouting, "What in the F's name have you done to my dog?" I do not like people shouting at me. It makes me scared that they're going to hit me or touch me, and I don't know what is going to happen. "Let go of the dog," she shouted. "Let go of the effing dog, for Christ's sake." I put the dog down on the lawn and moved back 2 meters. She bent down. I thought she was going to pick the dog up herself, but she didn't. Perhaps she noticed how much blood there was and didn't want to get dirty. Instead, she started screaming again. I put my hands over my ears and closed my eyes and rolled forward till I was hunched up with my forehead pressed into the grass. The grass was wet and cold. It was nice. Okay, what do you get from that character? He sounds autistic. Why? What made you think that? Okay. Right. He couldn't really deal with it, and he didn't really show a lot of emotion, but you knew he was uncomfortable. Very tuned in. He was, go ahead. That was just what, yes, yes, because you get the sense he's young, and a young guy, probably, it doesn't say female, but I get the sense it's a guy. And a young guy's not going to notice an older woman's, house coat and pink toenails and that sort of thing. And the other thing that really stood out, what was one thing that seemed real unusual that he noticed? There you go. He knew exactly how long he'd held the dog, and he backed up 2 meters, So yeah. So that's exactly right. That's an autistic character. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. So he is an autistic character. So those are ways that you can all those details really that you put in your book need to tell us as much as you can who that person is, who that character is, without telling us, showing us. You know, the old first rule of writing fiction: show, don't tell. So show us through their thoughts and their dialogue and that sort of thing, those details, who your character is. Marcy, do you have some exercises?
Okay, get back in your groups. It's forced community. Writing is a lonely, solitary process. I'm making you bond. Okay. Look at the front of the handout. Your character's voice should reflect upbringing, education, age, where he or she is from, their personality. I want you to think of a character in one of your stories, and I want you to fill in the blanks with those 5 things. Yeah. Yep, upbringing, education, age, where he or she is from, their personality. Okay, now we're going to take about 5 minutes, and I want you to free write a scene incorporating these things about your character. But don't make it obvious. Don't be like, I'm Sam Smith. I'm 49 years old. I'm a man. I mean, try and do like these examples that Jenny gave to you. And then, if you're comfortable, I'm going to have you read them to each other in your group and let them see if they can figure out what the gender is, what the age is, the upbringing, things like that. Any questions? Okay, go. 5 minutes. Okay, so get with your groups, and I want you to read what you wrote and see if you can figure out the upbringing, the age, the different aspects of your characters. Don't everybody read at once. Go.
Good job, group. They worked in the back and play poker when they were working. And there would be and they would know there was a machine that if it got stuck, they would just reach in and pull it out. That was their job. And I was
Has everyone had a chance to read? Who knows? All right, one more. All right, a few more minutes. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you guys, we need to start wrapping it up. Tell me, what did you learn in doing this? You need more polish? That's a very honest answer. I need more polish. Yes, sir? Every good story needs a good editor. That's right. Amen. Yeah. I should have given that caveat that everybody was allowed and expected to write very poorly. Bad writing. First drafts, bad writing. What else?
Sometimes you only need one word to.
Oh, yeah. That's nice. What was your one word? Or recruit. Nice. Powerful. Good for you. Yes, sir?
Praying and she spelled well, you know,
Wow.
that's the way she is. She just
Anything else? Yes, sir. Right. The voice. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I thought of this about point of view. Have any of you read the Poisonwood Bible? Oh man, I mean, you should go home and order it now. In fact, it was up for the Pulitzer the year that Michael Cunningham won for the Hours. But it's set in 1959, and this missionary takes his wife and 4 daughters over to Africa, and it's such a powerful story. And it's narrated by 5 different characters: the 4 daughters, and I think the dad. And Barbara Kingsolver, who is the author of that novel, every scene, when she'd start a new chapter, she would write it 5 different times through the 5 different characters' viewpoint to figure out who had the most powerful version of that next scene. And she did that the whole book. It is it's the Poisonwood Bible. It's as thick as a Bible, but it is an amazing story, and just her commitment to her craft is really amazing. But anyway, I want to end on time, so I'm going to hand it over to Jenny. Y'all have been fabulous. We've really had a good time with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw a couple of other thoughts out there, and that is sometimes if your book, you feel like you're struggling with it and you can't figure out why, try writing the opening chapter in a different point of view. For instance, or a different character, yeah. When I started, my early books were all in third person past tense, and so when I started writing my book Sandwiched, I wrote it in third person past tense, but I kept struggling with it. I couldn't get into the groove of it. And I thought, something's not right here. So even though I had never done it before, one day I just got the bright idea, I'm going to try writing it in first person. And so I did, and the story just poured out of me. I mean, the change was just incredible. But then I had a problem because I wanted to go into 3 different characters' points of view. And so what I ended up doing was I did alternating chapters, and they were all in first person from those different characters' points of view. I had an elderly woman, a middle-aged woman, and a teenage girl. But just making that one change helped me find the right voice for my novel. So a lot of times if you're struggling, you might just do a little exercise and try either changing the tense or the character who's your main character, that sort of thing. Write it through a different character's point of view, and just see if that might not make something click. You may be trying to write it in the wrong point of view or from the wrong character's perspective. Seems like I had one other really profound thing to say. What was it? Yes.
Well, maybe this will inspire you. You're not a member of yet join one.
Yes.
Be honest and the comments that one of my but an author or your characters are flat. There's no characterization. So as it is, it goes nowhere.
Okay. Yeah, critique groups can be, sometimes you have to keep, I was in many before I found the right fit. So keep looking, keep doing it. Yes.
Story or a novel, whatever, is your characters have to change. There's
Mm-hmm.
got to be something in that story.
Yes.
That's the main thing. They got to grow.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And that's true even for nonfiction. The information you're trying to share with your readers, how did the people start here, and what you shared with them, how did it change them? How did they end up here? So you're right, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's about change.
One last little announcement. My friend Travis Irwin, probably a lot of y'all know him. He and I have been talking about doing some teaching some classes, doing some workshops, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. No, we don't want to do them online at first. We want to do them in person. So what we kind of have envisioned is to do the nuts and bolts sort of thing, but go really deep into it. And I actually taught that at the WT Writers Academy for 2 summers, and so I have so much material that goes so much deeper than what we were able to get into today. So if any of you think, and it costs $700 to go, the Writers Academy is wonderful, and if any of y'all can do that, please do. But not everybody can afford $700 to go to the Writers Academy. So we're going to teach the class I taught at the Writers Academy for far less than $700 and do it over a period of, like we haven't really worked all the details out, but it'd be several classes. So if any of you think you might be interested in that, if you put give me your name and email, when we get it all developed and know exactly, it'll probably be late fall or in the winter, depending on some different things that we need to work out. But if you think you might be interested, give me your name in this notebook and your email, and I'll let you know. It won't be any pressure, but just let you know what we come up with and when it's going to be and where and the cost and all of that. But thank you so much for having us. We've really enjoyed it. Thanks.